Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks to all of you for being here today. I'm always really excited to speak to you all. This is my second time talking to the British Pest Control Association, so it's really lovely to be back again, and thanks for the invite back. So today we're going to be talking about termites. So I know that this has been the social insect hour, or a couple of hours as it may be. But so termites do fall under that. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first, I wanted to give a little bit of a caveat here that I know that you guys really don't deal with termites all that much. This kind of, when I was researching this talk, I was like, oh, I'll see what termites they have in Britain and try to tailor this to that. And then this was the news article I found. And I was it just tickled me so much because I was like, yeah, they did do it. They got a victory on subterranean termites in 27 years. So this is actually the only thing that I've been able to find about subterranean termites. You guys do get drywoods on occasion and things like that. But so this is my caveat that I know that you guys really don't deal with termites all that much, clearly as evidenced by this paper, this article here. But the thing that I wanted to emphasize, though, is that this is an example of it happening once. So it's not thinkable to think that it could happen again. So this is a great indicator of why education is so important, why you need to keep teaching yourself about these things. Just because we see a lot of invasive species these days, their ranges are expanding thanks to climate change and other things like that. And also, subterranean termites are now established in Europe, at least. It's not that much of a skip, hop, and a jump over to you all. So this is something to keep in mind when you're going to do these services potentially. So we're going to talk about termites on a very general level today. There's a lot to talk about termites. You could literally devote your entire life to studying termites and probably still not know all of it. So this is just going to be a very high level view of termites that we're going to talk about, but hopefully it gets you thinking. And then if you do happen to see termites when you are inspecting someone's home or something like that, then maybe you have the jump on that. So given the caveat, let's jump into some numbers here. So termites by the numbers. So there's actually over 3,100 described species that we know about right now, but actually only about 1% of those actually do structural damage to buildings. So this is about 183 of them worldwide, but there's probably a lot more termites out there in the world that we just don't really know about yet. The estimate suggests that, at least in terms of the United States, that we're seeing up to $6.8 billion in US dollars, and that's about 5.3 billion British pounds. So that is a huge amount of damage that these guys are doing annually, I'd like to note. So this is a huge problem, at least in the United States and beyond, in terms of the damages that they cause. And people are investing in their homes, right? That's where their financial investment is. We're trying to protect that as best we can, protection of property. The large colonies can at least eat 500 grams of wood in a day. So that can really mean a lot of damage pretty quickly if the colony is large enough. However, it's at least reassuring to know that it does take colonies a very long time to get to that point. They generally are very slow growing, and it can take almost decades for them to get up to this point of a large colony. But even still, that's still a lot of wood that they can eat in one day. And just to give you guys a perspective on what this can look like in in an actual home, this is a picture of a home that had to have a complete remodel done thanks to termites. And if you look up here, you can see some of the termite damage that completely rotted away this wood that made it very structurally unsound. So this can really mean not only a lot of damage, but a lot of time and a lot of money that your clients might have to put in thanks to termites. All right, so we're going to talk about where these things came from. So this is a who's who on the story here. For a while there, because of the colony relationships, a lot of people thought they were related to ants, actually. And it sounds like you guys already talked about ants earlier today, so we've already got that primer. But there's some really key distinguishing features between termites and ants that kind of point them in different directions evolutionarily. So number one is the antenna. So ants will have elbowed antenna. The termites will have beaded antenna, which is a pretty easy characteristic. The ants will have that constricted waist, so they look like they're wearing shapewear. They got that really snatched waist, but termites are just going to have that sausage body. They don't have time or money for shapewear. They just look like sausages. But if we go on to the alites, there's also a couple of differences in addition to the sausage bodies and also the antenna differences as well. So the alates for ants will have that window pane wing venation that's very characteristic of Hymenoptera. And then the termites will have a very fine lined wing venation, which can be a really distinguishing feature as well. Now, it's important to note that termites will have kind of a strong band on the outside of the veins, but then the inner veins will be very fine lined. Also characteristic of Hymenoptera, the ants will have uneven wings, and then the termites will have even-sized wings. So the Hymenoptera will always feature larger, longer front wings, and then the smaller hind wings. But termites have the same length the whole way through. So because of these differences, for a while there, we thought termites were their own order. So they were the order Isoptera for a very long time. But the more we thought about this, or the researchers thought about this, the more they were like, this doesn't really fit, really, when you think about it. So they started looking at the genetics of all of this, starting to go a little bit deeper into the DNA side of things. And it turns out that the closest relative that we could find to termites was actually a social wood roach. So these are actually the connecting feature between termites and cockroaches. So this paper came out, which kind of made me laugh, which it was called Death of an Order, so very solemn, but also funny at the same time. But basically, it confirmed that termites are basically eusocial cockroaches. And so that's where they fall this day. So here's Johnny. They're actually eusocial cockroaches. Congratulations, everybody. So really, when we think about this now, they're considered in the order Blatonia, which is where we find all of the cockroaches. But then there's that taxonomic step below, which is the infraorder Isoptera. So that's where they sit evolutionarily today. Like I said, these guys do have eusocial colonies, so they work together. They have their own little fortress, and then there's also multiple generations happening at the same time. So those are the key characteristics of eusociality. But so we have our swarming event here where they'll go out and mate. The alates will go out and mate. They'll form a new colony with the king and queen. They'll produce eggs. We'll have some larvae come out. And then for a while there, they'll just have workers and soldiers being produced. But once the colony gets big enough, they'll actually have the energy to expend to make nymphs that will go into alates, and then we'll continue the whole process again. But keep in mind that, again, this is a very slow process. These guys don't grow very fast. So it's just something to keep in mind that these guys can be cryptic for a very long time just because that's how they are. All right, so let's talk about termite behavior. So these guys generally have very poor eyesight. They are very more chemically motivated, so they communicate via pheromones a lot of the time. They'll use it to recognize nest mates, they'll recognize pathways to food, and then they'll also use it to alert the soldiers to attack on a colony, or if there's an attack on the colony, or if there's something weird happening, then they'll also release that pheromone to make sure that the soldiers know to go off and go take a look at it. But one of my fun facts about termites here is that one of the common alcohols that is found in ballpoint pens, specifically the blue pen, 2-phenoxyethanol, that's a word for this morning. But specifically the blue pen has termite pheromone mimic. So you can actually have a really fun time drawing little patterns for them to follow, and they'll actually follow them very closely. So it's pretty fun little elementary school, primary school experiment if you have the means to do. But this is the queen. So the queens get pretty big. They can produce a bunch of eggs all in one go, like up to hundreds of eggs a day. And the termite colony will just be at her beck and call for this. It is possible if the colony gets large enough that they'll have multiple queens, but there's always the main queen that will continue on the process here. So termite feeding. So these are actually one of the only animals in the world that can digest cellulose, which is the kind of starchy product in wood. And it's not just for wood, it's also twigs, grass, paper products, etc. We also often find that a lot of libraries have issues with termites just because they can get into the books and then will actually completely destroy the books and will just burrow their way through, which is interesting to see if you ever have the opportunity to see that. So they're able to do so, though, through the help of protozoa, bacteria, and flagellates. So these are all kind of things that will help them in their gut to digest that really complex carbohydrate. And they also have different feeding styles based on the termite type, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So there's 3 distinct groups of termites that will feed very differently based on which group they belong to. So trophallaxis and cleaning. So these guys, again, are eusocial, and they do a lot of their communication through trophallaxis. This is the exchanging of spit or other products as it may be, but they'll also clean each other off a lot too. So they'll actually do this in terms of just trying to keep the colony clean and making sure that we're not having any pathogens get into the colony. But they will exchange food and symbionts and things like that. So this is actually, every time they shed, they'll actually expel all of their bacteria and then they'll regain it when they are able to start feeding again post the molt. So it's a continuation process that they keep going through. So they can do mouth to mouth, but they also will do anus to mouth. So this is often how they get their symbionts back on that front. And like I said, they'll also clean other individuals, which can pass on pheromones, symbionts, and other kind of things. But it will also be a self-cleaning process for the colony as well. All right, so we're going to talk about the termite groups 3 here. So first we have the dampwood termites, and then we also have the subterranean termites and the drywood termites. So we will go into all of these in a lot more depth here, but these are the big 3 to keep in mind about. So the subterranean termites are the family Rhinotermitidae. These guys live and nest underground, which makes them very difficult to know if you have them or not until they start becoming big enough that they're reaching up into the house. So these guys make extensive highways and mud tunnels. So that can be one of the key features that we tell homeowners here in the States to look out for, because the mud tunnels will go up the side of the foundation of the home. And some of these guys may also nest aerially, depending on certain environmental conditions and also food sources that they're able to find. There's a couple of distinguishing physiological features about these guys. So the pronotoms are going to be narrower than the heads, so that neck piece there, that'll be a little bit smaller than their actual heads. The soldiers have smooth mandibles compared to the other groups that we're going to be talking about. And the alates feature those 2 main pigmented veins that I mentioned earlier. These are actually the most common structural pests that we see, although that's not to say that they aren't the only ones, but these are the big dogs out in the world, especially some of the ones that we have in the States can be really aggressive in terms of the amount of wood that they can consume within a day. So this is the kind of characteristic of subterranean damage. So like we mentioned, they have those mud tunnels. They'll actually put the mud tunnels in their food source as well. So that can be a really key feature to look out for if you happen to stumble across subterranean termites. They will also feed along the grain of the wood. So they prefer that softwood on the inside. So they'll leave these striations along with the mud that they pack in there as well. So these can all be really key features to keep in mind for when you're looking at subterranean termites. All right, so the drywood termites. So these guys are probably the one that you end up seeing the most. So this is the family Calotermitidae. These guys are really commonly found in things like furniture that get shipped out and also crates that contain food and things like that, just because not everybody fumigates before they ship it off. This can be a real source of issues in terms of the shipping and handling side of it. So these guys will nest inside the food source, so they don't nest outside like the subterranean termites do, but these guys do need a moisture level of around 15% or less. So they have a couple of distinguishing physiological features. So their heads, as you can see here with the soldier and the worker here, they'll be the same size as the pronotum, so it just looks like a straight line the whole way through compared to the subterranean termites, which have that distinct difference between the head and the pronotum. The soldiers, as you can see here, will feature teeth. So they have pointed little teeth, and some of the drywood termites too will also just feature these kind of blockheads as well, which can be really distinctive. So they won't even really have mandibles. They'll just have these blockheads that they'll use to poke their heads through and just stop up the hole if they think that there's something threatening a colony. The alates have 3 main veins, which can be another key characteristic of these guys as well. So drywood termites are also pretty easy to distinguish based on damage. They will feed willy-nilly on a piece of wood that they happen to find. But the main thing that you'll be able to note about drywood termites is those 6-sided fecal pellets. So they will actually have all of their fecal matter inside of their wood source until it gets to be too much. And they'll make kick-out holes, so they'll drill a little hole in whatever food source that they happen to be residing in, and they'll actually push out all of the fecal pellets from there. So you'll end up getting little piles under the product or beam of wood that they happen to be infesting. So they can be really easy to spot, and you can see the distinctiveness of the 6-sided fecal pellets. It is important that the fecal pellets can be confused for cockroach feces sometimes. So just make sure that you can see that six-sidedness of it because cockroaches don't have that feature. All right, so lastly, we're going to talk about the dampwood termites. So the dampwood termites are all three families combined into one. So the Rhinotermitidae, the Calotermitidae, and then the last one is Termopsidae. So these guys we really don't always see as structural pests. They can be structural pests. They need a super high moisture level in order to survive. So most of the time, it's more an indicator that you have a really bad moisture issue in your home. So once the moisture level is fixed, then these guys really can't deal with their lives anymore, so they will clear out after that. They are very similar to the drywood termites. Pretty much the difference between these guys and the drywood termites is the level of moisture that they're able to tolerate. So the drywoods, again, will be less than 15%. These guys need super high levels of moisture, like thinking like rotting wood in the woods kind of levels of moisture is generally where they like to be. But again, the heads are the same size as the pronotum. The soldier mandibles feature teeth again, as you can see here. And then the alates will also have those three main veins again as well. So that can be another key feature to distinguish. And these guys will be the largest of the pest termites that you might encounter as well. So that can also be a really key distinguishing feature on that front. The dampwood termites feed the same way as the drywood termites do. They are a little bit willy-nilly in terms of wherever they decide to feed. So there's really no rhyme or reason to what they're feeding on. And these guys will also additionally have those six-sided fecal pellets as well. So that can be another key feature that you're dealing with that. But again, the moisture level is really the key feature to keep in mind for having a moisture reader on hand for this is always a great tool to have whenever you're doing termite inspections. And just to give you a sense of how different the feeding differences can be. So we have dampwoods over here on the left of your screen, and then we have drywood termites over here on the middle side, and then subterranean termites on the right. So you can really even just see within the wood itself how the dampwood termites feed versus the drywood termites. So again, these two, you can tell that this has been very damp before. The drywood termites will be, again, a little bit more willy-nilly. Same with the dampwood termites, but that subterranean termite will always follow that softwood. And so that can be a really key distinguishing feature when you're looking at wood damage itself. All right, so how do we treat for these things? We're going to do a very high level of this because I know that, again, we're just brushing the surface here for 35 minutes on termites. We're going to just do a very high level look at this. So integrated termite management kind of features a number of things. So number one, it's going to be inspection and identification. So like we talked about, those key identification features can be really helpful in terms of how you manage these guys. The non-chemical treatments are also really important as well. So again, if it's something like a dampwood termite, really making sure that you're taking care of that moisture level. Also, the chemical treatments can be really important as well. And we'll touch on some of that here in a bit. But really, arguably, I think the most important thing in terms of termite management is that continuing monitoring and communication. A lot of these places where they end up deciding to propagate is a great feeding location. So that often means that you might have returners or other new colonies starting to build up. So really making sure that you're not only doing the continued monitoring and doing those follow-ups, but also making sure that you're communicating with your clients about signs to look out for if they might have termites again. Just making sure that everybody is up to speed on the education part of it and understanding the fact that these guys might come around again. It's not a guarantee if you treat them that they won't ever come back. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the last thing that's also very important are the repairs, if necessary, because some termite damage doesn't always mean that you need to do repairs. But if you do need to do repairs, just make sure that the termite colony is eliminated, because if you start doing repairs and you know that the termite colony is still there, this can mean that they will move house, literally and figuratively, and will actually go to maybe a different part of the house that's a little bit more inaccessible, and you won't be able to manage that colony as easy. So these are things that you need to keep in mind about before doing the repairs. All right, so let's talk about inspection and identification. So remember, the thing to underline, highlight, italicize, bold here is that these guys are really cryptic species. You're really not going to see them unless if the colony is big enough. So this is something to just keep in mind, that this is something that we always need to be aware of, especially in the United States, where a lot of our problems are subterranean, which literally means underground. This is something to keep in mind on that front. The other thing is to look for those signs of termite problems. So wood damage, sometimes the wood will sound a little hollow if you just beat on it with a little bit of a screwdriver or a hammer or something like that. Maybe not too hard with the hammer, but just keep that in mind. If it doesn't splinter, that's also a really good key that it might be a little bit too moist, and you could either have a moisture issue where there's a leak somewhere, but also keep in mind too, that might also mean that you're creating the environment for wood destroying fungi as well. So these are other things to keep in mind when you're talking about wood destroying organisms. Also, look out for those fecal pellets if it happens to be dry wood or damp wood termites. Look at the mud tunnels. Like we said, they're pretty easy to distinguish in terms of how they go up to their food source from the foundation. Alates, if it's a swarming season. Right now, we're actually in peak swarming season here in the United States. And then also, they'll leave the wings behind. So once they found their mate and they've gotten ready to start their new colony, they'll actually leave the wings. They'll shed the wings pretty quickly. They really don't use the wings for very long. For as long as they are spent developing the alates, they really don't spend a lot of time with that. So the wings can actually be a great feature of identification, even if you don't see the termites themselves. And also, again, if they leave them behind, then you can say, oh, I took a look at this wing under the hand lens, and I know that I have subterranean termites. So that can be a really key identification feature. The other thing to note is, especially with any sort of wood destroying organism, inspection often requires some knowledge about structures and how they're built. So if you need a refresher on construction terms, you can always try to reach out to your manager or reach out to other builders in the area just to get a refresher on that. Just because, again, these guys can be really cryptic, and some of the spots that they come up from are less than 1/8 of an inch. So really tiny spaces that are something to keep in mind in terms of that. All right, so non-chemical treatments, we're going to focus on eliminating those conducive conditions. So things like addressing those moisture issues that we were talking about, removing any nearby wood debris from around the structure, because this could be a source of potential food for these termites. And whenever possible, reducing that wood to ground contact. So trying to make sure that we're not providing any sort of available location for that as well. Heating and freezing can also be an option for kind of smaller things. Things like wood toys or anything like that. If you're worried about damp wood or dry wood termites, these can be great options in terms of kind of the smaller things. Just remember that if you freeze treatment anything, that you need to put it in a plastic bag to protect it from that condensation that might come up, because that can ruin wood products pretty easily. All right, so talking about chemical treatments here, there's a bunch of options out on the market right now. So number one are soil treatments. So these are treatments that are injected into the ground around near the foundation of the structure. There's two different kinds of these. So there's repellents and also non-repellents. As the name suggests, the repellents block the termites from even entering the structure. And these are injected pretty far deep in the ground. These guys aren't able to go past that barrier there. But then there's also non-repellents of the same kind of treatment as well. So the termites will unintentionally walk through this, gather up the product, and then we'll take it back to the colony and kind of spread it around, because again, these guys really focus on cleaning a lot. There's also wood treatments as well. So you can use a borate a lot of the time, is what many people use, both as a preventative and then also spot and local treatments. Baits are a really big deal these days too. So most of them contain an insect growth regulator or an IGR that messes with the chitin synthesis of the individuals. So when they go to molt, they actually can't molt all the way properly. And so then they get stuck, and then their muscles separate from the chitin, and it's a whole deal. But these guys also will bring back the bait to the colony, and then that will continue the process as well. So using the natural inclinations of these guys to share the good goods, as it may be, to their destruction on that front. But there's two options available. So there's one for subterranean baits, so bait stations, but there's also above ground bait stations as well, which are pictured here in my parents' basement, because you can get a master's degree in entomology and they still don't believe you when you have termites in your house. So this is just a key feature to stay humble. It's the moral of that story. But also the other key feature about chemical treatments is that fumigation may be necessary sometimes as well in termite treatments, both in terms of small scale fumigations, but even whole home fumigations as well. So this can also be really important too. But the important thing to remember about fumigation is that it's only taking care of the termite colony that's there right now. It doesn't act as a preventative, so you may need to fumigate again if that is in fact the case. So these are things to keep in mind on that front. All right, so monitoring communication and repairs. So again, you can use those bait stations to use as monitoring devices to check on colony activity. And again, taking the time to educate your clients about the signs of what you need to look out for a termite infestation can be really beneficial and actually will save you a lot of time and a lot of money and will prevent you from having callbacks on that front. And again, just to emphasize, the colony needs to be eliminated prior to doing any sort of repairs. Like we talked about, these guys will pick up and move house and might need to go to somewhere that's a little bit even more cryptic or hard to reach. So just making sure that the colony is completely gone before starting any sort of repair job. All right, so just to wrap this up, termites are really cool. They are super cool. They are a super cool organism in many different forms. A lot of them are more really important decomposers and will actually be very helpful in recycling nutrients back into the environment. But there are select species that are really bad, and they are cool until they eat your house. So these are things to keep in mind about this, is that they are a structural pest and a very economically damaging structural pest as well. And as we talked about, there's actually a lot of options that are currently available for termite treatments, and a lot of research. There's some really cool research coming out actually right now that is helping us understand so much more about termites and how they interact with these products. So it's not unfair to say that we're probably going to get some more tailored products for termites coming up. And we already have some pretty tailored products for termites to begin with. There's a lot coming down the pipe that looks really exciting in terms of termite research. And that is actually all I had for you today. So I will happily take any questions. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for coming up and doing a talk. We have got a couple of questions. The first one is around the baseball bats or the softball bat that you have on your back wall and why it's there.
Yeah, so I lived in Kentucky for a very long time, and right before I left, I went to the Louisville Slugger Museum, and I got a personalized bat for about $60 US, and I would argue it's the best money I've ever spent in my life. So.
Absolutely. If you can, why wouldn't you? There we go. That's the story of the bat as well. So with your experience in pest management, so what's the worst termite infestation that you've come across?
Yeah, there have been instances of termites completely destroying a house to the point where the house has collapsed. So they can be very structurally damaging. The other thing too that a lot of people don't think about is that we often get a lot of drywood termites on boats. So some people will have to do full boat fumigations, which is pretty wild to see. You can look up pictures of it online. But yeah, so having the circus tent on top of a boat that's sitting on the water is a pretty wild sight. Like I said, pretty much anywhere there's wood, a termite will find it.
There's always cartoons, isn't it, actually? The old cartoons with termites eating stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So with your background as like BC in your masters, obviously the UK have had termites. We have removed, and we do get the occasional invasive species trying to establish itself. Do you have an opinion on how likely it would be to, with the increase in trade and stuff, these invasive species, their establishment in their native ranges? Do you think that we're going to be far more at risk of having them established? So not saying obviously, exactly 20 years time we are going to have drywood or formers and termites in the UK. The risk is clearly there.
Yeah. I wish I could look into a crystal ball and tell you. There's so many factors that will contribute to that. But the main thing to keep in mind is that with climate change and a lot of the global changes that we're seeing, it is not impossible for that to happen in any way, shape, or form. It's just something to keep in mind. And you guys are doing a great job at educating yourselves today and being here for this. Just keep in mind that is something that can happen. And like I said, I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you exactly that's what's going to happen. But luckily, at least it sounds like you guys have too moist soil for a lot of the subterranean termites. So you have that at least going for you. The issue that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, they had very sandy soil that kind of wicked up a lot of the moisture. And so that's why those subterranean termites were able to persist for as long as they did. So areas like that can be important to look out for in terms of the moisture level that's necessary.
No, appreciate it. Yeah. And do you have a favorite species of termites?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. The conehead termites are really fun. So the soldiers are really cool. Nasuta termes is the genus name, but the conehead termites are really fun. The soldiers, instead of mandibles, they actually just have a point to their head, so they just kind of look like this. And they're just really cute. I don't know. They're just very endearing.
I think cute can work if that's what if people want to attach the cuteness of insects to favoritism. I don't think that's a category we can deny it any way.
Yeah. Listen, I'm an entomologist. I've gotten so many people being like, are you kidding me?
There's no judgment here, I can assure you.
I appreciate it.
No worries, but again, just want to say thank you again for getting up early and doing a talk. And yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much for the invitation. Would love to come back again if you'd have me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, the slides will be up online again, and Laura's email address at the end of the slides as well. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.